Hello, this is a live class from CINCILINGUA about prepositions. This is our 10th preposition class. If you have questions during this class, you can move your mouse around until you see the icon that says chat. When you click on that icon, it will open up a white rectangle like this. At the bottom, you can type your question, and when you hit enter on your keyboard, I will be able to see your question. I will be answering questions at the end of today's live lesson. My name is Kathy, and I'm so glad that you can come to the live lesson about prepositions today. The prepositions we will talk about today are aboard, along, alongside, through and throughout, up, on, and upon. You can see that I have along and alongside because I want to tell you the difference between these. Through and throughout, I want you to know the difference between those. Up and on, and when you put them together to be upon, it has a different meaning. Let's look at what the meanings are, and I think that it will be much more clear when you see some examples of each of these prepositions in the sentence. Aboard. If you are aboard something, then you are on board. You are on or in or going into a ship, a train, an airplane, a bus, or something like that. If you are along something, along means to travel in a line next to something long and thin. Along, when you use it as a preposition, means to travel in a line next to something that is long and thin. Alongside is next to, beside, or together with. Through is going from one side to the other, or from one end of something to the other. Throughout means in every part or during the whole period of time. Up means going toward a higher position, toward a higher value or number. Up is the opposite of down. On, in a position that is above something and touching it. Upon can mean the same as on. Upon can mean happening soon after, or upon can be used in the phrase once upon a time. Let's see some examples of these different prepositions. Okay, this one is aboard, being on board, in or on or going into a train, an airplane, a bus, a ship, something like that. Here's our example. The train conductor yells, "All aboard," to make sure that all of the passengers quickly get aboard the train before it leaves. So this person here is the conductor, and one of the jobs of the conductor is to watch and make sure that everyone gets into the train before the doors close. Another job of the conductor is to go and to take the tickets from every passenger and make sure that they have the correct ticket to be aboard that train. And here it looks like the mother is laughing because he is asking probably something like, "Sir, may I have your ticket?" to this young boy, just trying to be fun and funny. Anyway, something that is famous in the movies, you always hear in the movies, a conductor will say, "All aboard," and they say it that way, "All aboard," and it goes up at the end, meaning that they want everyone to hurry and get on because the train will leave very soon. So all aboard means all of you people get aboard the train right now, and the passengers will get aboard the train before it leaves, aboard. So you can get aboard a ship, you can get aboard a bus, an airplane. Most of the time, instead of aboard, I think with a plane, I usually hear them say board the plane, not aboard. Get aboard the plane. Instead of saying get aboard, they would just say it is time to board the plane. And after you are inside the plane, you are aboard the plane. Okay, the next preposition is along. And along, I put travel in here. Travel isn't really part of the meaning, but I wanted you to understand that if you are going along something, you are moving, you're traveling in a line next to something long and thin. So the boy and his dog hiked along the path through the woods. So this pathway, it's kind of like a road, a path that goes through the woods. The dog and the boy are walking, they're hiking along the path. They're walking next to or on top of this path, and the path is long and the path is thin. Thin. It is not wide, it is thin. Here is another example of along. Sherry walked along the beach to enjoy the sunshine. So here she is walking along the beach. And so she is going in a line that she is next to something that is long and thin. Now this beach is not very, very thin, but it does not go on for miles and miles. It is kind of thin. The beach from this way to this way is thin. The beach can be very, very long this way, but if there is a big space from here to here, then we don't consider it to be very thin. I am not sure that this thin is the most important part. I think the most important part is that it is something that is long. You can walk along the beach, and the beach can maybe not be very thin. Maybe it is a very big beach, but if you are walking in a line, in a long line, then you are walking along the beach. Sherry walked along the beach to enjoy the sunshine. Now, how is along different from alongside? It says the grocery store displayed the tomatoes alongside the green beans and mushrooms. So here are the tomatoes and the mushrooms and the green beans, and they are beside or together with. The tomatoes are together in the same place as the mushrooms and the green beans. They are next to each other. They are beside. I think that most of the time, at least in America, I'm not sure about other English-speaking places, but I think that most of the time in America, we would say that the tomatoes were displayed next to or beside the mushrooms. Alongside is very formal. It is very fancy. I think maybe you would see it in writing. It is not something that people say very often, alongside. I wanted you to know the difference between along and alongside, but alongside is not very, very common. Like I said, it is kind of a formal, used in a fancy situation when you are trying to sound like you are very intelligent and use big words. You might say something like alongside. And again, probably it is most often in writing and not so often in speech. Let's see another example of alongside. The first mate worked alongside the captain. Together, they brought the boat alongside the dock. So I have two sentences with alongside with one picture. So this wooden area here that you step on, that you can walk on this, and get from this wooden area to the land, this is called the dock. And when you park a car in a parking lot or in a driveway or something. We don't call it parking a boat, but when you dock a boat, then you tie the boat. He's got right here some rope to tie the boat to the dock. And this person could be the first mate. The first mate is the helper of the captain. The first mate worked alongside the captain. So the first mate and the captain, they were next to each other. They were beside each other. And when the boat came alongside the dock. So here the boat is beside or next to or together with the dock. The first mate worked alongside the captain. Together, they brought the boat alongside the dock. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clear, the difference between along and alongside. Through. Now, through we have had in one of our preposition live lessons before, through. Going from one side to the other or from one end to the other. Alexander walked through the tunnel. So he started at this side of the tunnel and went all the way through the tunnel to the other side. Through the tunnel. And I put through, even though we have seen it before, I put through in this presentation, in this class, because I wanted you to see the difference between through and throughout. Now, there is another word in English, through, that is spelled a different way. When you are playing a game and you throw a ball, and then you talk about, well, yesterday I threw the ball. That is not spelled in this way. This through, through, means to go from one side to the other side or from one end to the other end. This kind of through does not mean yesterday I threw a ball. So this person is going through the tunnel. Through is different than throughout. Throughout. That's a strange spelling, throughout. Throughout means in every part or during the whole period of time. This example means in every part. The chef was careful to mix chocolate throughout the dough so that there was chocolate in every bite of the cookie. Before, this is a cookie, in some countries they call it a biscuit. Before this is a cookie, before it is baked, we call the sticky ingredients that are all together to make the cookie, we call that a dough. A dough. And again, throughout has this O-U-G-H and a dough has a D-O-U-G-H, and dough and through are pronounced differently. Throughout and dough. At any rate, that's not so important. The important part here is that when there was dough, when it was all of the ingredients together in the bowl, the chef mixed together very carefully to make sure that there was chocolate throughout, not just in one part of the dough, but in every part. In every part of the dough, there was chocolate throughout the dough. And because there was chocolate throughout the dough, when they made the dough into a cookie, when they baked the dough, that now there is chocolate in every bite of the cookie. There is chocolate throughout the cookie. Throughout. Let's see another example of throughout. In this case, throughout means during the whole period of time. In the ballet, The Nutcracker, the character named Clara is on stage throughout the entire performance. So at the beginning of the Nutcracker ballet, Clara is on the stage, and in the middle, Clara is on the stage, and at the end, Clara is on the stage. So Clara is always on the stage throughout, during the whole period of time of the performance. Up, and this one is pretty simple. Up means toward a higher position or toward a higher value or number. Up is the opposite of down. So in this example, we see that Kara climbed up the rock wall. She climbed up the rock wall. So she is going in this direction up the rock wall. After she is at the top of the rock wall, she will have to climb back down. Have you ever tried to climb one of these rock walls? They have these walls that this is not actual rock. It is manufactured, and they put many different colored pieces of, I suppose, plastic here, so that people that would like to climb a mountain can practice in a safe place. You see that she has a belt around her, and that belt is attached to a rope, so that if she were to slip, someone can hold on to that rope and make sure that she doesn't fall down. But she is climbing right now up the rock wall, going in a direction that is going toward a higher position. Okay, here's another example using up. This one is toward a higher value or toward a higher number. The price of gasoline continues to go up. So here is someone putting gasoline in their vehicle, and this is what a gas pump looks like in Ohio. And the price here is the cost, how much it costs to buy that much gasoline. Down here, it would be telling you the price for each gallon, and then as you pump more and more in, the price goes higher and higher. But here they are just saying, wow, last year, gasoline was not very expensive, and now it is more expensive. It costs more money. The price is going up. The cost and the expense of buying gasoline is higher now. The price is going up. Oh, went the wrong way, sorry. So on, this one also we have seen before, but I put it in this presentation in this class so that we could see up and on, and then compare that to upon. So on means in a position that is above something and touching it. My cat loves to sit on the windowsill to watch the birds. The cat is sitting on the windowsill. So this part, whoops, I was trying to point at it and I accidentally clicked on it. This part of the window, this flat part, is called the windowsill. The windowsill. This clear part that you can look out of is the window, but next to the window is the windowsill. And so the cat is not down under the windowsill. The cat is above the windowsill, but also touching it. So we would say the cat is on the windowsill. The cat loves to sit on the windowsill to watch the birds. Now, upon. Just like alongside, the word upon is a very formal word. Again, I don't think, just like alongside, that people are going to say upon very often. Upon is more likely to be something that you would see in writing and not just somebody talking casually. So if someone is writing something and they want to sound formal or fancy, or they want to use big words and sound intelligent, then they might use upon. And upon can mean on, or upon can mean happening soon after. And in this case, in this example, upon means the same as on. The king wore a crown upon his head. The king wore a crown upon his head. And it would be just as easy to say the king wore a crown on his head. But sometimes when we are talking about things that are very formal, like kings, we might want to be extra formal, use fancy words, and we would say the king wore a crown upon his head instead of just on his head. But upon and on would mean the same thing in this example. Now here, happening soon after, and this means very soon, like almost immediately after. Upon hearing the news that her friend was in the hospital, Brenda rushed out the door to go see her. So upon hearing the news, in this case, we're saying as soon as Brenda heard that her friend was in the hospital, that very minute, that as soon as she heard that news, she rushed out the door to go see her friend in the hospital. Upon hearing the news, as soon as she heard that news, very, very soon after she heard that news, she was out the door rushing to go see her friend in the hospital. And so this is another time when you would hear the word upon in English, is trying to set up a situation where you say, as soon as this happened, then this other thing happened. Yeah, maybe upon arriving in the country, the first thing we did was go to customs. As soon as we arrived in a new country, we went to customs in the airport. Upon arriving, upon hearing. Okay, let's see another example. And this is the most famous example of upon in English. It says the word upon is most often used in fairy tales, which almost always begin once upon a time. In English, it's very common if you are going to tell a fairy tale, and some people might want to know, what is a fairy tale? A tale is another word that means story, and a fairy is a creature, a very small magical creature that has wings. Not every fairy tale has a fairy in it, but fairy tales are stories that are not real stories. This story that it's possible that Brenda is really rushing to see her friend in the hospital, that is not a fairy tale. A fairy tale is a pretend story. Usually there is a prince or a princess, a king, a queen, a fairy, something like that in or some other magical creature in a fairy tale. And it is very common for fairy tales to begin with, once upon a time, in a castle far away lived a beautiful princess. Or once upon a time, there was a boy named Peter Pan, something like that. Once upon a time, just meaning that there was a time, and we're not telling if the time was long ago or 5 minutes ago, once upon a time. And so that's the beginning of a famous beginning for fairy tales in English. So that was a lot of information in a short time. Let's review it and talk it over and see if you can remember. Okay, so aboard. Talking about being aboard is the same as being on board. And I told you that usually when I hear about a plane, I hear them say, board the plane. It is time for everyone to board the plane. And in that case, board is the verb. It's the action of boarding the plane. And usually when you say aboard, you get aboard. You get aboard means the action of getting onto a ship or a train. So with plane, I think I usually hear board the plane. I know that people are aboard a ship. They can be aboard a train. Sometimes I hear people being aboard a bus, but not as often. Okay, and then the next preposition was along. Along. Now, along is not a verb. I put travel in here, but travel is not the main part of this. Along. If you walk along, if you travel along, if you hike along, travel is what goes before along. If you travel along in a line next to something long and thin. So we talked about someone going in a line down a path. The path was a thin, like a thin road, a thin passageway to get through the woods. We said that the girl was walking along the beach. Now the beach could be thin, but a beach is not always very thin and narrow. Sometimes a beach could be more wide than thin. But to me, the important part is that it is something that is long. If you are walking along something, you're walking along the beach, it is not just take a few steps and you are finished. If you walk along the beach, you are walking for kind of many, many steps for a long time, walking along the beach. Okay, so along. Along means in a line next to something. Hiking in a line, walking in a line. I suppose you could swim along the shore. Any kind of traveling in a line next to something long and thin. And again, along is the part that's in a line. That along isn't the verb of traveling. Okay, alongside. Alongside, we said, is very formal. It is not used very often in English. Along means next to or beside or together with. And I think almost always I would hear people say next to or beside. We had the example. Let's go back for a minute here. We had the example of tomatoes alongside the mushrooms. Again, I think it is much, much more common to hear the tomatoes are next to the mushrooms or the tomatoes are beside the mushrooms. Alongside, you might hear, but it would be in writing and it would be very, very formal. Okay. Through, from one side to the other, from one end to the other. So we had someone going through a tunnel. Through a tunnel. Someone can swim through the water from one end of the pool all the way to the other end of the pool, through the water. You can look through the window from one side of the window out to what is on the other side of the window. You're looking through from one side of the window to the other side of the window. You're standing on one side and your eyes are able to see through it to see what's on the other side. You're not able to see through a wall. If you are standing next to a wall, you are on the inside or on the outside, and you cannot see from the side that you are on through to the other side. But with a window, you can see through the window. From one side, you can see out to the other side. But through, which is just a very strange spelling that you have to kind of memorize, Through, through, is different from throughout. Through meaning from one side to the other, throughout meaning in every part, or during the whole period of time. So we said that every part of that cookie had chocolate in it. There was chocolate throughout the cookie. Or that the character in the ballet was on stage throughout the entire performance. She started on stage at the beginning. She was on stage in the middle. She was still on stage at the end. She was on stage throughout the entire performance. Up, this one is very easy to understand. Something that is in a higher position or a higher number, a higher value. Up is the opposite of down. And on means to be in a position that is above something and touching it. So if something is on the table, it is touching the table, but it is also a little bit higher than the table. If it is down low, lower than the table, then it is not on the table. It would be under the table, under. But something that is on is a little bit higher than, it is above something, but it is also touching it, on. So we have up and we have on, and then we had upon. And upon can either mean the exact same thing as on, and it is a very formal way of saying on. We used it to say the king had a crown upon his head, because when we're talking about formal things like kings, sometimes we use a formal word like upon instead of just on. We'd say the man had a hat on his head. The king had a crown upon his head. On and upon can mean the same. Upon can also mean something that happens soon after. Upon hearing the news, she rushed to see her friend in the hospital. Or upon landing in the new country, we went directly to customs. And the other most famous use of upon in English is in a fairy tale, to say once upon a time. It's just the very beginning of the fairy tale. If you asked a child what that means, they would say, I don't know. That's just how you start the fairy tale. You start the tip. Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful princess in a kingdom far, far away. Something like this. It is almost the end of our class. I did have one quick question that someone asked, and they were asking about a board, and a board like a car or a taxi. And I don't think that you can get aboard a car or a taxi. I think a board is mostly used for ships and trains, maybe sometimes for buses. Boarding can be to board an airplane or to board a ship, but you don't get aboard in a car or in a taxi. And see if I can explain this really, really quickly. If you think about when you are trying to get in a ship, a train, or an airplane, or a bus, when you are walking to get onto those things, you are standing up. And so you are getting on, or you're getting aboard. When you get into a car or get into a taxi, you have to bend your head down to get into a taxi or get into a car. So you can get in a taxi, you get in a car, but you get on all of these other things that you're standing up. And I think if you're going to use the word aboard, it has to be for something that you can walk onto when you are standing up and not leaning down. And I think the other thing is usually when you say aboard, it is for something where you are not the driver. There is someone else who is going to pilot the plane or drive the bus or that's going to be in charge of the ship or the train. So someone else is driving you or taking you somewhere. And I think also when you go aboard something, there are many, many passengers. You are not the only person. When I get in my car, sometimes I am the only person in the car. And so we would not say get aboard a car, because for one reason, there's just one person. For another reason, maybe I am the driver. And then also because when you get in a car or you get in a taxi, you have to kind of lean down to get into those. And so we get in those. We don't get on, like we get on a ship or on a train or on an airplane or on a bus. Those we get on because we walk onto them standing up straight. So